6, we be in the mix with that rare candy paint job on the whip. I need food for the kids, money for the rent. Fuck a lockdown, baby, I can't do that shit. And I don't never vote, cause I'm fucking broke. And either way, I know the police ain't gon' leave me alone. On a plane by to visit Glen Rock, need crypto, told me I should bring the Glock with me. So I packed up my piece and I'm sliding. Cause we might get caught up in a riot. Middle finger Trump, middle finger Biden. Fuck a left, fuck a right, is you riding? Know you love to see it, dudes rocking. Ain't no politics, baby, we just talking. From the birds to the bricks, we be in the mix with that rare candy paint job on the whip. Who you with?
Just talking about how nervous I am. I'm nervous. Miles Davis, I'm the least, maybe the least informed on the career of Miles Davis out of anybody here. Even though in the last year or so, as we were planning this long-term episodes, those music episodes tend to be the longest planned out episodes that we do, even more than the fiction, the books episodes. I still don't feel like I know a lot of the nuts and bolts of the Miles Davis band, but I feel like I understand what Miles was trying to tell me, and I think that was very important. So we are covering the great Miles Davis today. I don't want to spend too much time dilly-dallying. We'll horse, but we'll horse about Miles. I'm not going to talk about a fun time at Target that I had or something like all the other episodes. Hell no. We are talking about Miles Davis. I would say the greatest jazz musician of all time. Some people say it's somebody else because they want to be cool, but the guy invented cool, so you can't be cooler with another answer. But let's introduce our supporting cast today. Obviously, Sai's here. He's part of the show, but he's in a special role today because he knows more about this than I do. And he's I feel like I'm hiring you as a consultant more so than co-host today, as like a Miles consultant, because he's always been your guy.
Yeah. Well, thank you. You're I'll humble myself. There's always a dude that knows way more about him than me or than yourself or whatever. So I mean, there's some serious Miles autists out there.
I've heard. They're scaring me.
They're scary.
The hell out of
they're
me.
scary,
Yeah.
but the scarier they are, the less serious you have to take them with. Because the thing is, all you got to ask yourself. Would Miles have fucked with this dude? No. Then the answer, then I don't. And so, yeah. And that's part of why I think the autobiography is so important. And if you guys remember, I had one condition on doing this episode, is that we had to talk about the autobiography, because it's the greatest. It might be one of my favorite books of all time, honestly. Like when it's all said and done, it's so good.
I listened to it on audio. We have all consumed the Miles Davis autobiography. Please keep going. Yeah.
No, and I agree. I mean, there's so many great jazz musicians, and of course, jazz is the ultimate, Reddit hipster. Like,
yes.
Oh, you like that? And obviously Miles is like the very, kind of blue, and everyone that's like the entry point and everything. But man, it just goes deeper than most people realize. He's the face of it, but he really is just a true artist, and dedicated to change, dedicated to playing for the band, and not, even though ironically he's the biggest superstar in jazz, but
yes,
is one of the most selfless musicians that you'll ever come across. And
I mean, he doesn't. He literally, he has that like cope where he's like, "Why don't you face the audience?" And he's like, "Oh, because this is the best angle." No, he was like a nervous guy. He wasn't really like his performances are fantastic, but he's not like you could tell the performance aspect was like, damn, they're paying how much for me to do this? Like, this is sick. We'll do this. It's like, he is a studio rat. He was a studio rat. He was a theory rat. He was not a slave to theory. He viewed theory as equal to his mind, which I loved. Where it was kind of like, if you are too much of a slave to theory, that is to him white, honestly, like saying like that's what white guys do. Like that's why white guys, whether it's true or false, like they didn't take the leaps and bounds that he did. And what you said about the jazz autists, like they'll always try to one up you, and they'll go, yeah, well, you like Miles, you should. I can't believe you haven't listened to Chim Richards.
Yeah,
and you're like, I don't know that's a name I made up, but like it's just like the Chim. You don't listen to Chim Richards, like it's Miles. Miles loved his work. I'm just saying, you don't know who it is. It's fine. And it's like, all right, whatever. Matt Fresta from Australia is here. First time on the free feed.
Oh, really? Yeah, that's
yeah,
true.
I think
I've been
so,
on the
dude.
other one like 19 times. But,
Literally, yes. Like you
Damn,
might.
that's a
Yeah.
that's a harsh oversight on our part. We need to get
No,
more free Matt.
it's always fiction. It's almost always a book that he's on
Yeah.
for. So
Yeah.
it's like
Because he
yeah,
reads
I'm
everything.
not like
Yeah.
knowledgeable about medical stuff or anything, so I don't know why I would be on the free feed.
And to be fair, there are Gain of Fiction previews with you on there on the free feed for like sizable ones, 30, 40 minutes. So I'm sure people have heard you before. But now you, correct me if I'm wrong, you're not like a massive jazz guy like myself, or like myself, meaning we're alike. You're not like super into it. You are a big time music head and stuff too. So just tell me real fast before we get into the specifics, like you agreed to take this. You are like me. You're like, oh, that sounds fun. Let's do that. Like it sounds like a fun way to spend time is like consuming an artist's work. How was this process for you?
Yeah, I'm not a huge jazz head. Like, I know like I mainly like Sun Ra. That'd be my Reddit. Like, he's actually the best one.
He does rule.
But yeah, because he's just weird as, and his autobiography is amazing. Or biography, I guess. But yeah, like when I was like 23 or something, I remember being in like a record store and seeing like Coltrane's Kulu Say Mama, like a Japanese pressing on the wall for like $30. And I was kind of like, that kind of looks cool and seems like a pretty cheap price. So like maybe it's time I get into jazz. And then I bought it and I loved it. And so I sort of bought a few Coltrane's, and then obviously like Miles is like the next name you think of. So I bought like Kind of Blue and Sketches of Spain and some others, and sort of went down a little bit of a Miles rabbit hole before I got kind of like hooked into the Sun Ra stuff properly. But yeah, I mean, I just agreed to this. Like, this was probably like that first conversation we had when you were just like looking for people, and you're just like, hey, do you want to do this? Do you want to do Miles Davis? I'm like, yeah, cool, I'll do it. So I feel like I probably am the least informed on this episode about his career. I only really know what's in the book, and I've forgotten most of that already. So yeah,
that's the best. You're already in my opinion. It's if you have the book, then you're miles ahead.
It's quite literally. So moving on, RC music legend, musical correspondent, the guy who's tasked with making me jealous by all the pictures he posts. I bring this up every time because there's always a new truffle tomato pizza that looks really good that's being made, and I'm like, I'm eating something not nearly as cool as that, and I'm not as connected to it either. But it's Eben. He was here from the Prince episode, which I think is a Hall of Fame RC episode. It was very special to me. Everybody loved it, but Eben, you jumped at this. You said Miles Davis. Hey, you're a Miles guy.
Yeah.
All right.
Definitely Miles guy.
That was like a Miles Davis answer, by the way, on a talk show. He was like, yeah.
I as far as like jazz and stuff like that, I kind of got into it in my 20s, but previous to that, like ever since I was a kid, I always loved like all the kind of like what people thought was like cheesier, like jazz fusion. Like I always loved that stuff.
Love fusion. Yeah.
Like since I was like, I remember watching Taxi with my dad when I was a kid, and like all the Bob James music and that. I was like, I loved, since I was like 5 years old, I was like, I love this music.
Is Bob James lame, by the way? Do I not know? I love
no, but I mean, I don't know, but back then, or if you get into like jazz in college, like people will be like,
oh yeah,
like turn their nose up at that.
Gotcha.
But anyway, so like my Miles Davis arc would have been like kind of getting into jazz proper, but then discovering that era, and then that like tied me back into my being a kid, and like, oh, okay, this is like this is the stuff I like, So as I worked my way up through Miles Davis, like realizing that he got, the way he progressed, I kind of like it got more and more into the kind of music that I really like, like in my heart.
Yeah. Oh, I can see how you'd want to spend a lifetime and become like a scholar. Like people just want to become like a Miles scholar. And again, we're kind of going to be making fun of those type of people a little bit throughout the episode, but I get it. I mean, he really is like, I'm a big fan of like the autonomous artist in a way. Like that's always the people I love. Like some of my favorite musical figures. Bowie's not quite that, but he kind of is. He has the eras in the way that Miles does. Prince, absolutely. I mean, great friends until the end, basically. In the 80s, and you even hear Prince influencing Miles in the 80s, which is awesome. It's like this It's like the opposite of a snake eating its tail. It's like the cool version of that. Like if the snake has sunglasses on while it's doing it, it's so tight. And I just, you know, I come at from jazz in like a sample based perspective, you know. Like I know that for a long time I had all these like cool jazz albums. Never, most of it was fusion though, because when you're making rap beats, fusion jazz is a cheat code. Like it's a cheat code. There's no lyrics. You can't, you have you can just chop up little Rhodes like samples, individual notes, especially with Miles. Half his track, like the band's warming up at the beginning, that's the best shit to grab, you know, when you're looking for all this stuff. But again, you don't necessarily listen to music that way when you're doing it. You're kind of you're listening for a sound. You're waiting for something to pop up. So it's a completely different experience when I'm going through especially that period of Miles again that I was relatively familiar with, at least. It was just so rewarding taking it on walks. I would just crunch like a double the dose of edible that I would take and just walk for like 4 hours listening to Miles Davis. I'm out of work right now, if you guys can't tell. And so that's it. Just like one of those people, like I feel like somebody's like a cop needs to drive me home sometimes, like an old woman or something. Like we just found him 2 cities over listening to Bitches Brew or something, or Sorcerer. But Miles is like one of those guys that you know is cool, and you know, but it doesn't line up with like the people you know that like jazz growing up. Like my geometry teacher with like a weird like speckled gray shirt tucked into jeans and like a clip phone and then like a weird hat. That guy likes jazz. I'm like, but Miles is cool? What? You know what I mean? Like this guy's not cool. You know, like this guy's like lame as fuck. And you find out that he probably has like a weird like gatekeeper mode for jazz and stuff. And so it was so hard to kind of pair how cool Miles was with like jazz. But as I got older, jazz became classical for me, where it's background stuff. It actually gets the juices flowing a little bit. It is classical music to me. It is kind of American classical music, in my opinion.
It's great reading music. If you just like want some noise to read to, it's like the best thing to put on.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, it's so fun. We're gonna get you right back to the episode, but I just wanted to let you guys know of a few other things we offer at Rare Candy Industries. We have a Substack with free and paid subscription options. Free subscribers get access to all written content. That includes Bob's Red Pill. That's the best thing going on the internet right now. Trust me. Paid subscribers get full access to our premium episode feed. And that's just every episode we don't necessarily want to share with the general public, if you know what I'm saying. Again, that's rarecandy.substack.com. We also have merch. That link's a little long for me to say right now, but go to the description, go to our merch store, and find a shirt that's right for you. We have Rare Candy shirts, Dr. Bronner soap label shirts, Rishi mushroom shirts, all types of stuff there. Check it out. There's got to be something for you. And lastly, check us out on social media. On Instagram, we're Rare Candy Pod, but on Twitter, we're at Rare Candy Pod 1. All right, enough of that. Let's get you back into the episode. So let's get into him, man. I mean, let's get into him. There's much to discuss. Miles was born in Illinois, but grew up in East St. Louis. Shout out Scott, by the way. I don't know if there's any. Shout out to Scott. I trying to think about that. I'm like, damn, dude, Miles Davis is from Scottville, man. Yeah. And he's from out there. East St. Louis, definitely a decent jazz scene out there. Growing up, he was one of the richest. We're one of the richest families in East St. Louis, despite being black. I mean, his dad was a dentist and had like this massive farm out there.
They were horses.
Quite literally horses. His mom was like kind of in the arts a little bit. Kind of, I forget what she was. Kind of like a stage. She did like stage plays and stuff. Kind of just one of those like, kind of like affable women, you know, from back then. That was just like. Just do whatever was going on in town she was at and stuff. So you kind of see the combination of like the work freak, work, and then the kind of eclectic mother. Makes a lot of sense. Miles was a sickly child. This is going to come out all throughout his career. Very sickly. Just I think he had sickle cell anemia. Kind of always looked like a real small guy when you see the childhood pictures of him. But his dad got him a trumpet, and he joined the school band, and then. You know, by the time he's a teenager, he's a touring bands would just come through. You know, it's like, especially like black bands and stuff. It's like, they're not traveling in like luxury stuff. And, you know, jazz has a lot of drug. You might've lost your guy to like prison, you know, your other trumpet player, or like died or something. It was a very, very different time in music. So people would just say, hey, we need a trumpet player. So you would just go stand in and play. and that's kind of how Miles got started. Eventually he ends up with the was it the Eckstein, was it Billy Eckstein band, is that the name?
So.
ends up sitting in with them, where there's Dizzy Gillespie and Charlie Parker are in this band as well, which what a time to be alive. And they're just singing kind of those oh hello my lady, kind of like variety show stuff. And you have these massive genius people. And before we start getting into the albums and stuff, it's just important to set the scene. Miles was always super influenced by Dizzy Gillespie and had this almost demonic relationship with Charlie Parker. Anytime he's asked about him later, it's like, yeah, Bird, obviously the great. I mean, like, you're talking about like one of the most talented people ever. Pretty like irredeemably bad person though. Like anytime any story about you hear from him is just like, yeah, he would just like stumble in your house and eat everything in the fridge and then like sleep on the floor and stuff. And like he just always thought that his talent was all anybody ever cared about. Like these people will never kick me out because I am so talented, which kind of true a lot of times. There's a story about Parker getting his dick sucked while he picks Miles Davis up. He's just getting head from a girl while he's eating chicken. It's like a Boondock skit.
A classic, yeah.
Yeah, it's like a Boondock skit. And he and like I forget what the quote is, where he's just like, look away then, motherfucker. Like, like he just says that. It's like scary, kind of like there's some people that I think are truly, especially how gifted he was, like have just this weird demonic energy and stuff. And there's no disrespect to his music or anything, but those are great parts of the autobiography, which is talking about how horrible Charlie Parker was, despite being the savant of the time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's like every. Oh, sorry, you go.
Oh, I was just gonna say it's funny because Dizzy Gillespie was like a saint, like a family man, just a wholesome guy and stuff. Like total opposite, both geniuses in their own right. But it's a funny little dichotomy. What were you gonna say?
I was just gonna say, I bet you the Kindle thing, like if you get to the part with the eating chicken and getting his dick sucked, like it's just like 455 people have highlighted this passage or something.
Yeah. I mean, I took a community college class, just this jazz like theory thing, and the teacher, he was cool, and I would already, obviously, I think I was kind of not to be. I mean, it was just a bunch of like kids in there, and then there was me who had already listened to autobiography, and so the teacher was just soy facing, being like, Charlie Parker got head in the cab story. He just can't. Everyone's like, what? And I was like, yeah, I see you, dude. Yeah. Yeah,
that's a good way to get teenagers to read it.
Exactly.
Oh yeah, and like the book is I mean, the biographer is Quincy, what's his name? Quincy
Troop.
Yeah, he gets a lot of flack because he did come out. Well, Miles was a misogynist, and like he kind of did do that a little bit later, but I can't imagine it was that easy to like take these Miles Davis scattered thoughts and like make something that we'd want to read, because it's kind of segmented. It's fascinating. It's very like segmented, and it's very like you can tell Miles is just omitting like human error in a lot of these things, like where it's just like, yeah, and like then some 3 months went by after I was detoxing from heroin, you're like, oh, well, what was happening during those 3 months? Nothing important. Anyways, nobody wanted to talk to me ever again, and just this kind of it's interesting though, because like I was saying, you're talking about these jazz people, like the geometry teacher jazz guy from like the 90s, or the guys who like look like Chuck Mangione or something, like these guys. It's weird that like jazz people would get like do heroin, like punk rock drugs, and make jazz music. Like that's still very strange to me. But you hear guys talk about it. Like, Sai, who's the guy? I'm going to be doing this all episode. Who's the guy whose son, he played with Miles a lot, but his son was Mtume?
Oh, Mtume.
Yeah,
that's his name, right? That's the
but it's. I thought Mtume was the dad, the son of a guy who played with Miles.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Actually, don't know. Let me look that up right now. I'll be referencing to. I'm definitely not.
Yeah. So he, maybe, unless I have that lineage wrong, but there was a guy that played with Miles Davis and that was his group. But like,
Jimmy Heath.
Jimmy
okay.
Heath.
Mtume's Heath's son.
Oh. Yeah, isn't that crazy? And Mtume, if you're not Mtume fans,
right? Come on,
awesome.
Yeah, Juicy Fruit, hip hop.
Program that rolling 808.
Yeah, exactly.
Dude, it's. I mean, and just So see, there we go. I guess I do know something. All right. Like it was.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. So he. Jimmy Heath participates in a lot of like Miles documentary content. There's these round tables of Marcus Miller and Jimmy Heath and stuff. They're really cool. Like all the guys that were around, like, you know, that were still alive, of like eras of Miles Davis that would tell really good Miles stories, which is pretty good because you get like you get like you can tell some of them are like the real story rather than like some of the kind of like Miles embellishment in certain ways or kind of revisionism at times, which I like in the book, but it's also fun to hear their story of it. But yeah,
also quick shout out to speaking of lineages, quick shout out to Darren Waller, great grandson of Fats Waller,
he is
Raiders legend
I
and
did know that,
jazz pianist legend. Sorry, I just had to point that out too.
Yeah, no,
for all our Raiders fans that are listening to the Miles Davis episode,
also did heroin.
Yes, 2 heroin addicts. yeah. Sprouts cashier, heroin addicts to like $15 million a year contract.
So like whenever people ask him about his addiction, again, this is very niche content here for our audience, but this guy was a NFL tight end who was like out of the league. He failed like over 100 drug tests before he finally got right. Like he was just he was bagging groceries at Sprouts and like passed out in his car on his lunch break and got fired. Like he was just that level of heroin addict. But like I wonder if it got pointed back as like, hey, do you ever realize you came from a jazz family? Like maybe that's why you do heroin. Like just something about that. But anyways, so we're working our way up to just the first era of Miles albums. And he's got, let me just pull up his whole page, because he was a very prolific artist despite having to take literal years off for health reasons and detoxing from heroin and those are separate things actually. But you know, we start out with you know, the new sounds, the young man with the horn, the blue period, and all of these. What are some people's favorite parts of that era? Again, this is not an era I super identify with Miles Davis, but it is really interesting to hear him to hear the genesis of it.
I actually quite like this era. Oh, you go, Eben. I'm sure you got something more interesting to say.
No, you started. It's all good.
I was just gonna say, I just quite like the early era actually. Like I like that kind of coffee store, just smooth, chill jazz, like very piano heavy. Like you were saying earlier, like he's like the least arrogant guy and he leaves a lot of space. I always kind of like what everyone's doing around him. Like I often find the trumpet parts like the bit I'm kind of the least interested in. It's usually like the keyboards and the drums and bass and stuff. So I like Kind of Blue was the first one I got, and I like the one it's like, I think it's Blue Moods was another one. It's got like that kind of Celeste organ sound on it. Yeah, this one, Blue Moods. I like that one quite a lot. So I kind of like this cool kind of like chill coffee store era a lot. Like if I'm usually going to stick something on his, like the other ones I've kind of like the more crazy ones I got to be just like really in the mood for, where these ones like I'm kind of can always be in the mood. Yeah.
Eben, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, to piggyback off what Matt just said, I think Miles was great at always, no matter what era, he always was going to have a really good band, you know. He's like so it's not just about himself. He's definitely got people around him that the whole thing is going to sound good no matter what, and it's not just all about him. But for me, my favorite of the early, like where he really starts to go crazy and kind of figure out like the real Miles sound, is that Volume 3. So I think it's like the 6th or 7th album.
54.
That album to me, 54. I mean, the first 2 tracks, Take Off and It Never Entered My Mind. I mean, those are It Never Entered My Mind is just crazy. Like, and I feel like he just has another level. He's starting to get a understanding of like the recording medium.
Yes.
So it's not that he's necessarily playing better, but these are more.
Yeah, it never entered my mind. It never entered my mind since you brought it up. Is so just like peaceful and but it's got this almost like somber piano intro, which sounds like classical. It sounds like a very like classical composed piano, and you know, it's funny because he's never I don't think anybody, people would say, I don't think as a trumpet player alone anybody's gonna say Miles is the GOAT, right? Like it's just not typically the case. Like he's as far as a composer of music is what like people will say, and it might be some people's favorite trumpet player because I mean the music is incredible. But I think Matt's correct. Like a lot of the times, like his trumpet playing is not why you're listening to it. You know, it's not. It's his mind. You're listening to that. You know, go ahead, Si.
That same teacher I had, he's like, yeah, Miles is like the worst trumpet player I ever heard, but he's the GOAT. You know, it's just kind of, it sums it up perfectly. You know, maybe that's a little strong. He's not the worst.
Yeah.
You know, but it's
like Bob Dylan's the worst harmonica player
Yeah.
ever, but like it rules.
iconic. Yeah.
To me, on this album, he's really that kind of what you guys are saying is when I first started to hear it, that he's really speaking. It's not so much about the trumpet chops, but he's like speaking through the instrument, and there's you just get a lot of feeling. Another thing about this album is that's when he started recording with Rudy Van Gelder.
Yes.
Who, to me, that like, I mean, if you go through the Van Gelders, you know, everything that was recorded there, it's incredible. But
Horace Silver,
I mean, all the Bob James, all that fusion stuff in the 70s. But Van Gelder, I think he had a kind of different approach to recording that some of the in that era, like the other jazz heads were like poo-pooing on because he would use effects I think his albums made the group sound like almost more like one instrument than how things were recorded previously, where they wanted like every breath and every, like, you know, if you rub the microphone on your coat, like they wanted that in the recording, like weird.
Also love the texture of Art Blakey's drums all throughout this album. Just like, you know, again, knowing when to pull back, knowing when you're not just doing like a solo all the time and stuff. And Miles, you talk to anybody, Jimmy Heath said this, and I completely agree with him. In his older era, you know, this bebop, hard bop kind of era back then, the ballad is like, for me, where he shines, like was where you get that creativity and a guy who, you know, you hear his stuff about women, you know, fuck that bitch, whatever, you know, she didn't know what she was getting into when she was messing with me. But it's like, man, in your music, it's like so like romantic and stuff, you know, like it's crazy,
nostalgic too.
And
it's
women
like,
love this era. Women love this era of Miles Davis. Like I guarantee you, women do not like Bitches Brew. I'm sorry. If you do, like, maybe they do, but like you put that album on and they're like, wait, is this still Miles Davis? Like, no, but if you play It Never Entered My Mind, if you play Blue and Green, if you play all like
that's another favorite.
They all love that stuff. My wife loves, she's not into jazz. She likes it. Like, she thinks it's nice. Like when she's cooking and I put on like some jazz, she really likes it for cooking. Like she's like, oh, this is.
What did he said? He's like, this is for like when you're walking down the street with your girlfriend, kissing her on the cheek, kind of shit. You know, it's kind of you knew what he was doing, you know, and it's weird because also like we're all looking back, and even in the 70s era when he's playing with kids that think he's a legend, and this is just shit that was but the early stuff, it was just emerging, and this was new. It's hard to keep, some stuff gets so old. Anything from the 50s is like, you know, it's a completely different. It's hard to imagine what that's like when that just dropped, right? And when it's like, oh, this just, you know, all the time. Right? Yeah, where it's like, oh yeah, this just came out last Tuesday, and it's like people are like, oh shit, this is fine. And you know, not everyone has a record player, not everyone has a fucking radio and all this stuff. So it's a trip to think about.
It's also tough too, because like it's like stuff just appears on like different albums and stuff. Like there's all these, like, you know, back then you kind of didn't really own your music and stuff, and it would just appear. Like, you know, Blue Haze is not on his like Wikipedia discography I'm looking at right now, unless it came out, it was a re-release later. But I love the Blue Haze album, you know, from 1954, where you get his I believe it's a cover of 4 in 1, which I think is fantastic. And you know, one thing that he talks about in the autobiography that I think was interesting, and I think it's the 78. It was a 70. These records were 78s. And there was like time constraints on these things. Like you were not making 10-minute jazz albums, 10-minute jazz songs where you were really able to show off everybody in the band, really solos here and there. He would say you had to get in and get out. If you wanted to play, it was just a few measure, you know, you'd get a few measures to mess around with, and then you're back. You know, drummers would have to make their money on the fills, right? Like they'd have to do all, like, to show off. So this is a really like restricted, like Puritan era of jazz, I think, where he still shines really well. It's so fun to see him expand off this.
And that's something, what you just said is actually really important, because the mindset, and I think probably the best, most famous example of this is like Coltrane Giant Steps, which is way later, of course, but where the famous anecdote is that you know, the piano solo is botched and he literally loses because it's such a fucking complex piece of music. Right. And it's like, of course, it's still like an excellent piece or whatever, but you hear him, he's just like, was it Tommy Flanagan, right? The pianist on I could be wrong on that, but they just leave it in the album on one of the most classic jazz songs of all time. And they're like, yeah, just leave that shit in. And it's like, literally, you know, it's like, if anything today, it would have been like, take 47 and take Ableton and mudge it over a little and this shit, and it's irreplaceable.
And ironically, Miles would use Ableton if he was around nowadays.
Yeah,
or like he would ironically like do that nowadays, which is funny. He would still have the idea. He was such a forward-thinking guy, which actually is why his music career lasted as long as he did, and why it had so many different peaks, individual peaks that you would see in his redundant as that sounds. He the other thing that you would hear is like, he was a big first idea, best idea. Shout out J. David Osborne, like just a first idea, best idea guy. He would hate if you would be like practicing. He'd be like, just play that on record, like what you're playing right now, like play that, let's record it. And I get that. He was kind of podcaster mentality. If we're talking for 10 minutes before the fucking thing, half the time that's some of my favorite shit. If I'm not hitting record, holy shit, dude, like we missed out on that funny story you just told me. And like there's conversations on his album in the background. You can hear people talk. You can hear him, hey man, can you you hear that in the background, like it's Bob Ross Happy Accident kind of shit. Not to get all Reddit, but like I love it's not sloppy. That's not the way to do it. It's just, it's natural. It's another word that's overused nowadays, cozy though. It is cozy, you know.
Also, if you hear interviews with with different musicians or whatever that played in his bands in the eras, they'll be like, so how much would you guys rehearse? And they wouldn't rehearse at all on these early albums. It was just you show up. There's some chords written on a paper, and it's like this is what we're gonna do. You know, like if you're in the room recording, it's because you're at that level to be able to.
They don't have time half the time to practice. It's and not time, but money. Like it's like time and money. Like you don't have the studio space for that long. Again, these are black artists in the 50s, like that are already kind of not getting the mainstream acclaim that they need and all that stuff. So they don't have like, I mean, it's kind of just like old. You heard about like Black Sabbath, completely different era, but like Black Sabbath, you got 48 hours to cut, and they cut 2 albums and 2 of the most iconic rock albums ever. They do it, and does that always work that way? No, everybody's got a process. But I think
Led Zeppelin 1, I love. Yeah, that's another quick one. You know, it's legendary.
Dude, these people are just like they're under the skull. So like Miles is thinking like, hey, we'll get it right, guys. I hired you. You are talented. And what Sai was saying about like giving people room and letting them breathe, I guarantee you he doesn't get half of these great up and coming musicians in his band if they aren't given the opportunity to shine in said band. If it's all about Miles Davis playing the trumpet, fitting as many notes in as possible, he doesn't get Herbie Hancock later. He doesn't get Paul Chambers. He doesn't get all of these people that come in because you're not going to stick with him. Like it's not worth grinding it out, you know?
Yeah. And you can see, this is what I love about him. You can see, we'll talk about this later too, I'm sure, especially in the fusion era or the late, like the quantum physics era with Herbie Hancock and stuff, where you'll look at some of his concerts and if you look at his face, like Herbie Hancock or Chick Corea will play some weird dissonant notes and you'll see his face scrunch up and it'd be like, God, dude, what the fuck are you doing? But he would never try and stop it or would never try. And or like my favorite is and I'm getting way ahead of myself, but like Gary Bartz in the 70s went up to Miles and he's like, dude, you need to tell Keith Jarrett to stop playing underneath me with the keyboards. I hate that shit. I want to be free. Like, stop. Tell him to stop it. And then Miles went to Keith Jarrett and he's like, hey, Gary really likes it when you play underneath him like really loud. Keep going, And it's just like he doesn't give a fuck.
Baseball coach, that's baseball coach stuff, dude. It's like I don't like the way that motherfucker's hit me. Hit that motherfucker till he likes it. You know what I mean? Exactly. Like just that. Like I mean, the guy was a life coach in a way. Like if you were, you have to realize, like, dude, jazz was a degenerate fucking. Rock and roll doesn't exist yet at this point. Or if it is, it's in its infant phases. This is rock at the time. These are rock stars. Like you had the kind of like doo-wop group guys, which were their own thing, but these guys were the real like nitty gritty, drugged out, drunk in the club kind of stuff. So you had these young knucklehead kids that were obviously extremely talented and stuff. And Miles was able to let them play loose and free. He didn't want that kind of edge taken away off these guys, but also like, hey, like, I know you're great. I just need you to be great. Okay. Like, and you'll hear it like in the later interviews. There's that one, there's this one, I forget what the guy's name is. He's this host in Philadelphia or like Pennsylvania or something. He's this dorky white guy, but he knew a lot about Miles Davis, and he had this talk show, and he would have young kids come out and play.
Oh my God.
For Miles. Dude. It's one of the best ever. The kid comes out and he plays a little bit, and he's like, yeah, you need to practice, man.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah. And he's like, he says that, and then at the next two kids come out, they don't ask Miles what he thought after that. They like, the producers dude, you're fucking ruining these like public school. But you could tell he was just like, I'm serious. Like, I would tell you to throw your trumpet away if you sucked. Like, I wouldn't sugarcoat that. Like, me telling you to practice means okay. You know, like, hey,
when he's like, play it in E flat. He's like, dude, you're playing it, and he's literally just like, it'll be easier if you play it in E flat. That's one of the best. Who the fuck is that host? Like, why? What?
He's hilarious.
I love
him,
dude. Oh, it's great, and it's like, what are you doing? That's a whole genre in and of itself. Is inviting Miles in for an awkward interview in the 80s, especially. Dude.
Well, the book was coming out, and he was touring in he was kind of going on his last tour. Bill Boggs was the guy's name.
Yeah.
Bill Boggs, no relation to Wade, but yeah, he was he was that is one of the funniest interviews ever. And he's there, and he's like down to clown. Everyone in the comments thinks Miles doesn't like the guy. I'm like, no, he doesn't like Dick Cavett. He doesn't like guys like that who, like, you know, really just were trying to like use him for laughs or something. Like he was really on there. But again, like you know, you're seeing, you know, Miles is definitely getting a solid group together. And again, when does Paul Chambers enter the band? He's pretty kind of in one of his first big bands, right? Or no? Is the bass player
like late 50s?
Yeah, so maybe around the kind of Blue era, right? Yeah, around there. Okay, so yeah, that's do you guys have anything before we get to Kind of Blue? That's like the first Miles stuff. Birth of the Cool is good, but I don't have a lot to say about it. But if you guys have something about Birth of the Cool, I'd love to talk.
The only thing I would say about Birth of that's like recorded in '49, so it's before all of this stuff. Actually, even though it came out later. But the one thing, and this kind of relates to what we were just talking about, that I think you see over and over in Miles's career is that he, like other people in jazz, weren't doing this as much as him, where he's about the vibe and like creating he's one of the first people that, to me, is like creating albums where like the album has a vibe to it, you know. And the Birth of the Cool, like, it's really different. It's not my favorite thing, but it's like, it's pretty amazing in that it's this sort of cohesive vibe, where I think a lot of other jazz stuff before Miles Davis was just like, it's meant to sound like you just went to like a club and you just heard a set, you know.
Yeah, you're in Talented Mr. Ripley, like you're in Talented Mr. Ripley, and you're Jude Law and Matt Damon, and you're just listening to jazz. But like Miles feels like different, you know. Like it's
I like Birth of the. I like it. I like it. Lisa Simpson shouts it out on The Simpsons. You know, like I first heard that snippet. It's a pretty unique arrangement, right?
Yeah, it's very unique.
I'm
a Jerry Mulligan fan, so I like it.
Hell yeah. Baritone sax. Yeah, that's the other thing. I've always been I need to learn saxophone because I've always wanted to learn that. And when I was a kid, and my dad's like, "What do you want to learn?" When I was like a teenager, and I was like, or you know, preteen, and I was like, "Oh, guitar or saxophone." And he's like, "Why don't you do guitar?" And I'm like, okay, but I always had that yearning for saxophone. There's all the different kinds and everything. It's so sick.
What's interesting, there's hella rock guitarists that you hear it all the time. They're like, my idols was like saxophone players.
Yeah,
so
that makes sense.
You hear that a lot when I solo. You know, like whoever, like that dude from the Doobie Brothers with the glasses and the big mustache. Like he talks about that all the time. He's like, I tried to play like Charlie Parker or like whatever.
Interesting. Yeah. And Parker was still the, like, you know, Miles isn't the GOAT at this point. Like during this album, like Parker to me seems like that's everybody. That the only reason Parker's allowed in anyone's house is because he's so good. Like it's funny how good Charlie Parker had to be for people to put up with this. But Charlie Parker died at like my age, 34. You know, like he was in such bad shape, and you know, it's funny they talk about, like, you know, and I get it, right? Because you don't expect anyone to like pay the toll too early in life, even when they're living bad. You think, oh, by 50, 60, they're gonna really wind down. But like when Charlie Parker dies, like it kind of just like stops everything. It's kind of just like, can we do jazz anymore? Like, the way people are talking, it's so insane. And hearing Miles Davis think about that, the way we know Miles Davis, he's just thinking like, man, when like Bird died, he's like, there's like 5 things that he says over and over again. That shit fucked me up, man. Or he could play like a motherfucker. Those are like that. Basically, like every sentence ends with that in the book.
And all these guys all the hard bop guys were taking sheets of music, like taking heads from big band stuff, and just they would stay after the big band was gone or everything, and they would just play it double the speed and improvise over it. And that's what people think jazz is. Like, I mean, obviously it's more than that, but that's how the whole thing got started, basically, right? In terms of what we think of jazz. Obviously there's like the whole like, oh, New Orleans did this and that, like all the old stuff, but that's all Charlie Parker was doing, basically, and just fucking genius, just complete master.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. Like it almost feels like, you think about people's like purpose on earth, like you think about like, was he just meant to just be one of the, like, I was rude talking about how demonic of, just because I know people like that, not nearly as talented, that's why I don't talk to them, but like I've known people who just like suck, like there's no like reason to have them around other than like maybe one cool thing that they do, and it kind of just like you're drawn in, you want to get that like evil out of your life, but there's that one, I mean, for some guys it's a crazy ass girl, but luckily I didn't have to deal with that, but it was just like you have this allegiance to this person who doesn't give a shit about you the minute you decide not to like cave in to their weird impulsive demands. And it was just like, Charlie Parker's just like eating like late career Orson Welles and doing heroin like, fucking Lou Reed at the same time. It's just crazy, and they were talking about, Miles was drawn to like the hard bop and like bebop kind of stuff. He was drawn to that because at the time, and look, the side of Twitter we inhabit is gonna, scoff at this, right? Because talking about like racism, these are people like, oh, I want to get the Civil Rights Act, revoked and stuff. But at the end of the day, dude, like a bad comment on the internet sends a lot of people spiraling. So when you had a guy like legitimately telling you couldn't enter a building, or you're beat up by police standing underneath your own marquee, with your name on it and stuff, like sure. you have that is like the real capital R racism. It's not like Kendall Jenner selling do-rags, like that's not like, that's like the racism we have now. But conversely, you had the people like Louis Armstrong, who everybody, the way black dudes talk about Louis Armstrong at that time, they were like, yeah, he was just like tap dancing, you know what I mean? Like minstrel show stuff. But that was how he got famous. Like he just that was his role in there. But like Miles saw these dudes wearing like sick suits and stuff and not really chasing like a white audience outright. The white audience would be like the beat poets that would come in doing heroin, I'm sure, and coming in to like be a part of something cool. And I think he loved that idea of like not trying to impress somebody, because Miles is never trying to impress somebody. He's trying to get an idea out of his head and trying to impress himself.
It's a weird paradox with him where he was kind of obsessed with his image and his being cool and whatever, but also, I think he kind of fell into his role. I don't know if he ever intended to get as big as he ever got. No. It was just kind of a happy accident. He's perfect for that role, and part of that is the humor, like him getting interviewed, like talking about Quincy Jones and shit, just weird stories where you're like, only Miles could be that way. Very unique guy. And also the paradox of him being like the Prince of Darkness and just having this weird dark aura and kind of bad and distant and messed up, but also at the end of the day, actually like a really cool guy and just chill, and like fun, likes to hang out with his friends and cook fish. And
he doesn't like when he doesn't like when you approach him as Miles Davis. It seems like the way to be Miles Davis's friend is to kind of just bullshit with him.
Yeah.
And not be like, what's up, Miles? I'm so-and-so. I'm from, this group. You might have heard me play. I think I seen you at that one. That he's always like, man, fuck you, dude. Like, it's always like that kind of like, but you would hear about the guys like, they'd be like, yeah, I was just like talking to this guy, man. He was pretty cool, man. And we were just kicking back. Like it's like I hear about Joe Rogan. You hear Shane Gillis talk about Joe Rogan. everyone always asks him how to get on Joe Rogan. He says, well, if you ever fucking meet him, don't ever ask to come on his podcast. That's the way you don't get on. Like he invites you, you know, and it's it's the same way. Like, you know, you have like what everyone wants. And even before it's what everybody wants, even before you're like the marquee act, you still have to conduct yourself as such. And I kind of like that about him. A pretty funny thing about Miles Ahead is an album I think is worth talking about. The lore behind it is pretty funny. It's the first one with Gil Evans. Gil Evans is a massive part. He was the white boy who could get down. Miles, as you know, as discriminatory as he was and as pro-black as he was, if you were a white dude that got down, he loved you and would be there forever. Like, you know, so Gil Evans, he was there for Birth of the Cool, so it's not the first, but this is kind of the first under Columbia Records, which Columbia Records was Miles' first big break in terms of a record deal. Was Columbia Records. That was a big one. That's when you had access to the 30th Street Studio in New York, which some people say is the greatest music studio of all time, best acoustics and stuff. Definitely, you can hear the difference, I think, on the albums that come from this area. They're a lot more polished. And I think a lot of it is just raw sound and environment. But there is a white lady on the cover of Miles Head, and she's doing some like Purple Noon, like Alain Delon, like French New Wave thing on there, and she's on there, and Miles is just like, man, what the fuck is this bitch doing on my album cover, dude? like he's
Saline.
I mean, and again, it's kind of a pleasant looking jazz album cover. I have no problem with it, but like it's really funny. Like, and that's the problem when you get with a big label, that's the trade-off. They can just take your song and be like, all right, cool, our PR guy, our team is going to put together like an album cover for you and do all this. And if you're strung out on heroin like Charlie Parker, or you know, like kind of one of those guys that is just getting by on like talent alone and not that obsessive thing, Charlie Parker probably doesn't give a shit what's on his album cover, dude. You know, like, but I thought this it's a great album too. And
you really didn't have control over your shit back then. It wasn't even a thought. Now your album's like your baby, and it has it's kind of weird. It's kind of like that. It all reminds me of like the Meet the Beatles kind of vibe, you know, where it's just so it's like it's just a total product that, and that's back when you know, like the record companies had, you know, giant fucking office buildings like Don Draper ass shit and stuff, you know, and it was just, it's got kind of, I mean, they still have that today, but it's just a totally different era, never to be repeated.
Like Clive Davis. I mean, how long Clive Davis was around? I believe Clive Davis was the guy at Columbia Records back then. I could have that wrong, but Clive Davis. I mean, I was like, damn, that dude was around back then. Clive Davis was with Columbia Records forever, and he, you know, basically he's like, dude, we're gonna make you famous, like we're gonna get you to sell and do this, but we're gonna do it our way, because, you know, to be fair, when somebody has a different view of what you're doing, they're not necessarily wrong, right? Like when it's like, I'm putting this out, we're gonna get it to as many people as possible. The way Miles, like we were, you know, I just did an episode of John Cassavetes last night. It's kind of the same way, where it's just like, John Cassavetes did his studio stuff. He went and he did Rosemary's Baby. He did, you know, episodes of Columbo, all this stuff. And but his projects, like his own directorial stuff, are very raw, and it's very him, you know, and he kind of had to suffer the consequences of those only being shown in like art house theaters and stuff. But it's his product. So both are correct. The guy that wants to market it to everybody and says, hey, it might be good if you had a white lady on the front, you know, might sneak past a few people because you're like the darkest guy ever, like, you know, like, you know, he's not even like light skin, like he's not even, like, we can't even like shine a light on him to look a different way, like, dude, he is Miles is dark, you know,
he is midnight black.
He is, he said blue black in the book, which I love. That's old like Western like blood meridian term, and which I did love, but he you know, this album, I believe this is Paul Chambers coming in. This is where we said he comes in. I like Paul Chambers a lot. He's, in my opinion, he's probably my favorite of this early era. Mostly because, and I've heard it, I couldn't figure out why I liked his style, because I just don't know enough about playing instruments to say it. But somebody had said it. Somebody who knows a lot about jazz had said Paul Chambers doesn't necessarily take the note on the one and make it the root. Right, he walks in on the one, with some of the stuff, and you hear it in So What. So What is where you hear it. That's not the root note that you're excited about, right? It's not like that rhythmic timekeeping thing. He's playing it as like an actual instrument rather than this boom 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 boom, you know, doing that. He's really walking with it. And just special shout out to Paul Chambers, I just gotta say.
Yeah.
So
I will say,
wondering,
oh, I will
like,
say, oh, go ahead.
there you go, yeah. No, you go, Eben.
Oh,
It's fine.
that it's cool that you brought up. It was a little bit of digression that you brought up the Cassavetes. I'm glad you brought that up because when I'm thinking like in terms of this album and all the when he every few years does an album with Gil Evans, that I keep thinking of that as like where he's going back to like a blockbuster movie, you know, to make his blockbuster movie. Yeah.
Oh, I see what you mean. So
and then he goes
Evans
and does his
Mm-hmm.
So like the Gil Evans albums are like his, you know, for the wider audience, his like really nice sounding, you know, blockbuster albums. And then he goes and does then he does his like crazy stuff in between or whatever.
Yeah, I mean,
I thought of the Gil Evans albums.
Yeah, because they kind of those Gil Evans, like that trilogy. I know he had some stuff in the early '60s, but the '50s to '60s, that Gil Evans trilogy is really cool because you have Miles Ahead, you have Porgy and Bess, which I love. I that one I can just put on and just leave on in the background. Nice rainy day, it's perfect. And then Sketches of Spain, which is one of the, probably the first Miles Davis album I ever sat down and listened to. I just had a vinyl copy of it, like from a dollar bin, that I always really loved. It was kind of Looney Tunesy a little bit, which I liked. For some reason, it just reminded me of like Elmer Fudd with like the little leaf thing on, like chasing bugs and like the old like Wagner kind of like stuff. Like for some reason it just sounds like that to me, even though that's not what's happening on there. But Gil Evans allowed him to Gil Evans knew what he wanted. That's what I think that's why he stuck around so long too. He knew exactly what Miles wanted. I'm sure Miles, there were many arguments I can imagine, but he kind of knew he's the one that was doing a lot of like he was like a conductor, right? Like is that he's that's kind of his specialty. And you'll hear like it's really kind of a treat when you hear Miles with like that big band kind of like or orchestra sound, I should say, not big band beneath him. I really like that. I really like the '60s albums too that they did together.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, just really a mainstay through his career. You know, he needed that dude in his life. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's like one of those guys that's so prideful. Like Miles, like if you listen, you know, the audiobook's read by this dude. I think it's read by the dude that does the First 48 narration for the show, The First 48. But he does the Miles like voice because Miles had to have Miles's voice was all fucked up because he had like a non-cancerous tumor that was bothering him on his in his throat. And for somebody who doesn't play like a brass instrument, I keep forgetting it's obviously a breath instrument, but it's like singing, kind of, right? I mean, like you kind of have to like sing into it in a sense. So it's like, God, no wonder that must have been like terrible, you know, like that, just having to deal with that. And then he had to not talk for 2 weeks, and they said for 1 week he was fine, and then the next week he was just saying "fuck you" to everybody, and it like kind of never really healed.
Yeah, I can't picture him without the voice. That's the crazy part.
I know what
like, after like a year, he's like, "This is actually kind of tight." You know, he's like, "This is."
It's so because you knew how sickly he was, so he kind of had like a sickly, like almost like he was everything he would say would be like really sharp and kind of sharp tongued, I should say, but like the voice was so soft it was almost like sheepish a little bit. Like it was so interesting. Like he kind of reminded me of like this jazz Michael Jackson, the way that he would speak sometimes, like when Michael Jackson would really get like snappy with reporters a lot and stuff, and when he wasn't in like the Jackson 5 anymore, but it would just with his voice would sound so soft and like calm. But Miles had like a more rugged version of that, which is funny.
Yeah.
So yeah, Kind of Blue is worth talking about a lot. I mean, it's a huge album. I think it's definitely the entry point for a lot of people.
I think it's also a turning point in his career. It's like
100%.
One of those turning points in his sound.
And he has, what a band he had for this album. It's a sextet. You have John Coltrane, Cannonball Adderley, Bill Evans, also very good pianist that he would use for quite a long time. Paul Chambers, Jimmy Cobb, who's awesome, and then you'd have Wynton Kelly, who came in on Freddie Freeloader, so which is a great track. Now, this album, like I said, it's once you get deep into like Miles stuff, this album doesn't become nearly as important to you. It's a step in, right? It's a step in. Anybody you show if somebody says what's Miles Davis, you show them this album, they'll go, huh, okay, like that makes a lot of sense, and they will like it. My personal favorite track is Blue and Green. I think that is just like one of the most beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful compositions ever. Like I don't understand how you can do it. So like it's so, when you hear Miles talk and then you put that on, it's like this cognitive dissonance, because you're just like, this sounds like the nicest man in the world made this song.
Yeah, I think it's the best song. Bill Evans is just this is a Bill Evans album. Like I'm not, and obviously like one of the interesting things about this is the dual saxophone thing with like two of the fucking greatest of all time. But really, like, Bill Evans is the guy. Just this album's nothing without that. I know John Mayer's like a huge Bill Evans nut, and he had a weird 70s career, kind of just like slowly withered out and then died. It was kind of weird, like not like never flashed out, not like it didn't have a big. It was like a drug addict, but just kind of, I don't know. It's kind of sad, but dude was from outer space for sure.
Yeah. And he got sick eventually, right? Like, he had like, I forget what it was. It was much later in life, but yeah, it sucks, man. 'Cause some of these guys, like, they become stars, like Coltrane, right? Coltrane Coltrane becomes massive, right? Giant Steps, like all this stuff. Also, not in the greatest of health. Also succumbed to a lot of,
liver cancer.
Liver cancer, which again, it's always like, you'd always hear people go, you wonder how he got it. It's like, I know how he got it, like it's just like the liver stuff, like and it's sad, but some of these guys, like, it's like he kind of seemed like another bird to Miles. It's like losing another bird, and Coltrane was getting too big for him at the time. Like it's not like he died in Miles Davis' band. He was saying after a while, he was like, I would get frustrated with him, but also knowing that he was ready to leave on his own. And that's got to suck. You have constant turnover, man. It's like being a good football coach and you're constantly losing your offensive and defensive coordinator every year. You just say you're going to, and that's why these albums are so good, but you have to find somebody as good as Coltrane, when you're done. It's just like, it's gotta be stressful as hell. Like, you're just,
Coltrane's special, man. He's
so good.
Like, just obsessed, like always putting Miles and Coltrane is like Pete Rock and Jay Dilla, it's just kind of like the same, like, just definitely not saying one's better than the other, but like Coltrane just went totally orthogonal in a totally different direction with it. And I mean, just the stuff like Giant Steps is obviously, that's how I got into all this, was Giant Steps.
Interesting.
Before even Miles or everything. And he's literally inventing a new tonal framework. It's like a totally different way of approaching tonality. It's just insane. Like, you don't do that unless you're a legit psychopath genius, just constantly under the microscope looking at this kind of stuff, right? And that's why just nothing sounds like that stuff. And anyway, and that's funny. It's like, those guys just did that in they're obsessed with that in like 9 months, and then they crank that album out, and then on to the next thing. It's like, it's insane, dude. And people spend a lifetime like learning Giant Steps, and they're like, yeah, that was like last year.
The nonchalant attitude of all, even Kind of Blue, Miles Davis, it's the highest selling jazz album of all time, and it's, they have it listed as 45 minutes long. I had heard it was 38 minutes. I'd believe either way. It doesn't matter. Very short out. It's not like there's not a lot going on in terms of like these big, massive songs that are happening on there. You get. I mean, it's worth talking about "So What," which might be one of the most famous Miles Davis like melodies. Like, name that tune in a couple of notes. Like, a lot of people can, even if they can't name what the song is, they just know it's Miles Davis. And the way that song starts is so interesting, because around this time you'd expect for that song, for the tempo that it has, for kind of the, it's a bit upbeat. I would, it's not like a super fast jazz song, but it's got like a nice kind of intro to an album going. You expect like a big band to start it off with ba bum bum ba bum bum like that, and then go into the you think that's what's going to happen. It starts out like everyone's warming up. It's just kind of a, Bill Evans is just playing kind of the skeleton of the melody, and then all of a sudden, the real magical sound is when you get Paul Chambers just kind of crawling in with that bass, and you just go, oh wow, this is actually that feels like the song that is like making your smash hit. It's like like making your smash hit, and it's weird. It's different than a pop artist, right? Because that's going to get played in different places. But like these songs were played in a lot of places. It was a huge album. Like Bill Cosby talks about hearing "So What" for the first time. I like to, insert my own legend into how Bill Cosby was using this album. Maybe, you wake up in the morning, a little hungover, a little sore, and you're like, man, that Miles record's still on. What happened?
Yeah.
But Bill,
something to drink. So
yeah,
what?
Spanish
so
Fly,
what,
dude.
It's,
sketches of Spanish Fly.
Yeah.
And you have,
what?
But yeah, Bill Cosby is like all throughout Miles's life, which I love. He's like from like literally like 1959 to like the 80s. They were friends, and which some shit happened that we don't recognize. Some shit went down that we're never gonna find out about. But but Bill Cosby was talking about being at like Temple University when Kind of Blue came out, and just like everybody playing the same album in like the dormitory, which is like, it's just this time that I like yearn for. Is we just don't like the same things now, contemporary stuff. No. Everybody watches a different show. Everyone's binging a show from last year or something currently. Everybody's listening to, everybody's like segregated amongst like pop standom, like some people are this fan, they might listen to it, but nobody is like going to the store, or even, if we want to updated technology for the sake of Miles Davis, because he would hate to be this reactionary, knowing in 2025 what we had available. He would, just going and like downloading different things to our phones and kind of just like sequestering ourselves, which I like doing. But I do yearn for the time where like everybody of a certain demographic played Kind of Blue. You had New York jazz nerds guy. You had these like William Burroughs type people that were all about it, which is interesting because Matt, you're a Burroughs guy, right?
I wouldn't say that.
We
did an episode on Getting Lit where me and Matt basically talk shit about him because we kind of hated the book.
I hate William Burroughs, dude. I can't.
I like the book Junkie. That was fun. Okay. And Cities of the Red Night is okay, but then we did the next book, the The Place of Dead Roads, and I think we both just were like, I think we're just too old at this point to like, you got to read that shit in your 20s. Like now it's kind of excruciating. And I don't know, I can listen to like Adam Lira talk about him and I can be like convinced like, yeah, he's cool. Actually, like Adam like gets it and can put it into good words. But then I just try to read it and I'm just, nah. I'll happily watch the Naked Lunch movie and maybe the book Queer. That one probably is okay. But yeah, I couldn't really claim to be a Burroughs guy.
I just like that these guys are existing tangentially, probably brought together by heroin. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they're probably just buying from the same deal or doing, this New York scene. I cannot stand William Burroughs, but he just that Naked Lunch was. I can't stand lying. I can't stand lying junkies, and it's different than listening to Miles Davis talk about his life.
I can't stand old junkies. Like, I understand someone like getting into it in their 20s and then whatever, but if they don't like find God or whatever, like if they're just still like 80 years old talking about how cool heroin is, it's kind of like, I don't know what to relate to with that,
Yeah, exactly.
Speaking of that too, like I guess the jazz artist that I'd think of most with like Burroughs would be like Ornette Coleman, I guess, because that's like the soundtrack to Naked Lunch is like Ornette Coleman stuff, and that's more that kind of real hip beat stuff. But like, because like the way Miles talks about Ornette in the book, and he just like doesn't get it, and he's like, yeah, this shit sucks. The guy couldn't play. Like everyone who pretended to like him was just saying that to seem like they're cool, and I kind of like Ornette, but like I get what he's saying with that, like. It is kind of some of his stuff is kind of like
might be hacky.
Really
might be
in the mood. It's basically noise. It's not jazz. It's noise.
Well, I like that Miles said that because Ornette's one of those guys. And same thing. I think he got better later in his career, Ornette Coleman. But you know, every like Reddit jazz Redditor is like, oh, Ornette Coleman, but then you could be like, yeah, Miles thought he was gay, dude. You know, and so I just love me. You know, it's like that these guys had their own little beefs, or even that they were like, yeah, that dude sucks, you know, and shit. I love that. It's so easy to look back on it now, and it's all just like, oh, picking like candy out of a store or something. You're like, oh, look at this one and that one, and it was like a living, breathing thing back then. You know?
And it's, since I brought up heroin, this is much in the past, I think. Miles had a bad heroin problem. You know, it's funny to hear these guys talk about it. You know, you'd hear about Jimmy Heath and all these people, whether they were big into it or not, they just knew that it was kind of this like thing that locked you in a little bit on like you could just, he's like, if you were drunk you'd get sloppy if you played, you know, because you have to operate like an instrument at like probably the highest level, you know, of anybody. If you're playing this level of jazz, you really have to do that. But like he's like, if you were doing coke you'd get jittery, you know, and by doing coke it's like Deadwood apothecary bottle cocaine, like, you know, you like back then it's not like that. Snorting coke is later, like in Miles' career, but like heroin just kind of like you were just neutral and you felt good. And even if it looked like you were nodding off, like, you know, Parker, you'd see like Charlie Parker, it would look like he was like incapacitated. And he would like literally like his pants would be like falling down, but he would be completely perfect. He would be hitting everything he needed to hit, adding the stuff that he needed to add that was specific to that show, you know, like get it just perfect exploration. But Miles got into it, and you know, shout out to Miles Davis's dad, because I don't think we get even 70s Miles Davis if Miles Davis's dad doesn't come in and make him so broke, because he probably is a casualty in all of this, honestly, if not the case. His dad yanked him off the stage. His dad had money, so he's like, I got money, I don't give a shit if Miles' career doesn't take off, I don't want to lose my son. And he's like, because Miles was at Juilliard for a while, and like his dad was like, okay, I got a son in Juilliard, kind of a status symbol, especially like a black guy back then. Like my son Miles doesn't like Juilliard. He realizes while he's at Juilliard that this jazz thing's happening way cooler, way more fun. He already knew the shit they wanted to tell him in Juilliard, and he felt that was restraining him, and he didn't want to go for some stupid certification, because what does that even mean? So, you know, for your dad, you're like, oh, I'm dropping out. And he's like, okay, but what? He's like, yeah, I'm going to do this music stuff. All right, well, you know, you better stay clean. He doesn't stay clean. He's completely strung out on heroin, really bad. His dad, again, locks him in a barn and just dries him out, which is rough for heroin. Like, it's not like you could die if that happens. But he was like, I don't give a shit. And, you know, Miles talks about it like he didn't slip up again. It sounds like he did a few times. Not from my place to judge, but he kicked heroin though, which is, you know, the other drugs that he would get into later. One drug made by Dr. Anthony Fauci might have killed him later, but that's not his fault. But he got into you know, coke and drinking later. You know, especially in the 70s, nobody was avoiding that. But he is kind of jazz sober. In a sense, how they say California sober. He is like jazz sober by the time Kind of Blue and stuff is happening. So it's interesting to contextualize for people who don't know, who think either he was addicted to heroin his whole career, or think that it was just for a small period of time. It was for a smaller period of time. So
Seems like a few periods back and forth. Like he's like the ultimate unreliable narrator. So it's like hard to like, you know, get what exactly is going on, because he'll like contradict himself in the same sentence. He'll like, I never did that thing. Anyway, I was doing that thing. Like,
so he's like, I didn't touch that shit ever again. So, anyways, me and Bill Evans was doing some heroin together, and like 2 years later, man, and we was, you know, and like it was just, you know, I get it. Like, to be honest, like I probably would have got into it too back then. Like, it seems probably pretty fun. You're playing this high level. The music probably sounds amazing. You know, Ray Charles would always talk about that. Like, dude, you kidding me? This shit was amazing. Like, heroin was so sick, dude. Like, and Ray Charles, you know, was pretty. I don't know how. I think it was more in the 60s that he did this, but he was one of the first artists to own his own masters, and actually like have that autonomy of the artist. And he was insane for it, because people thought he needed a lot more help selling, and that just simply wasn't the case. But you think about all of these guys are doing heroin at the time. Like, it is not a good it's not a good time. It's one of these, like, jazz could have become like a punk rock kind of thing, where like you get like that 5-year period of punk rock, and then everybody either dies out or moves on to like post-punk or both or something. But like I think that Miles prolonged, I think, the genre of jazz while experimenting in it. I mean, aside, maybe you can, you know more about the genre itself. Am I right about that?
Yeah, I think so. I think it's Gary Bartz says that it just slowed everything down, you know. And there you go. What's up, Eben? Yeah. I think that it's an important part of it, you know, for sure. Yeah. It's I mean, they all did it. You know, they all got down.
It's gotta be. I mean, I'm telling you, it's gotta be pretty sick hearing like you're like player, or not even hearing, like just playing and everybody's just like locked in. I mean, I've played around with drugs, so I get it. Like it's just it's especially when you're young and you're just like, dude, I do this for a living. Are you kidding me? And all I gotta do is walk like 2 buildings over and buy heroin from one of those weird naked lunch dealers or something, you know, like weird alien people, Cronenberg alien people that it's like cockroaches and stuff. Like
heroin is just like a virus. Hey, like every music scene has it, where there'll be like a few years where it just like infiltrates the whole scene. Like heaps of people get in with some of the cool cats, and then other people try it. And then after a few years and a bunch of people die and stuff, the next kind of few years, everyone's like immunized to it, and they're all kind of like, yeah, we don't touch that shit, that's bad. And then enough time lapses again that people forget about it, and they start looking at like Johnny Thunders or some shit and being like, yeah, man, I'm gonna like be the coolest guy in the scene, and they bring it back in. I've seen it happen where like I've had friends die of heroin. Like it just comes in waves, and like and then you just see the next generation. They're like, yeah, that's retarded. Who would fucking do that? And then 5-10 years later, like people are all just doing it again.
Yeah, I had a friend. I think I said this on the pod once before, but I had a friend who had kicked it, and I have only known him since he had kicked it, and he was cool. He was actually a really great musician, like finger picker, guitar type dude, and then he would also like he was like one of the only dudes that would sell like weed, you know, that I knew. So I'd get like $20 of weed off him every once in a while. And one time I was like, it was night, and I was like, hey, can I get something? And I met him at this park, and he had relapsed, and I had known him for like a couple years at this point. And I saw he's the only dude I think I've ever seen on heroin that I knew, you know. And dude, it was like insane because he was pretty like gruff dude, and kind of like, you know, kind of withdrawn and kind of brash, but in a cool way, you know. And then seeing him, he looked like he talked and acted like a straight like child. Like his voice was way higher, and it freaked me the fuck out, dude. I was just like, oh my god, like not that I would ever get down I was never gonna do it in my life, but I was like, okay, for sure now, not gonna, you know. And it is just wild, man.
No, it's like, and then like, you take the Percocets now, like that's like that stuff people just do, like perk 30s, man. That shit's like insane. It's heroin, like, you know, like oxy, like that stuff is just heroin. A lot of people now get addicted to oxy, and then oxy is so expensive, and doctors don't give it out the way they used to. And guess what you turn to then? It's heroin. I mean, it's the same thing with meth and coke. Like, you know, you do coke, party fucking coke. MGM. I got fucking feathers in my hair at the Lana Del Rey fucking thing. Oh, this is so cool. Then you're doing meth, you know, after a while, like, because you realize like it's Mulholland Drive, right? It's Naomi Watts like strung out in the diner. Like you realize what it actually is, and it sucks. So there's a couple compilation albums that come out again. Columbia Records can just like basically put out any kind of music that they want, whether you want it out or not. But Miles is seeing a woman named Frances Davis, a woman who in the Amazon 2020 George Floyd It Out documentary, it takes credit for so much stuff. It is ridiculous. All of the, like, look, I don't doubt that you're a muse in a way, right? Like, I don't doubt that. I don't doubt that these guys, you know, you're with this guy whose music is his life. You become part of the music. That is true. Stop, though. Like, stop doing that. It was so annoying. But Frances Davis, ironically, she was an up and coming dancer, and she literally got the Sondheim like West Side Story gig. She nailed the audition, and Miles was like, hell no. Like it was like, no. He's like, if you want to be my wife, you're gonna be my wife. You're not gonna be doing this shit. She's like, well, I thought I could have a career. He's like, well, you thought wrong. I have a career. So and then like she you know misses out on that, but she took him to Sketches of Spain. Now during this time, like I said, in 1959 Miles got beat up by a police officer. Those pictures are pretty iconic, but it does suck. He got beat up by a police officer, and a couple of them underneath his own marquee at a club, which is kind of funny because they're like, hey, you can't be loitering out here. He's like, yeah, but you know, kind of like I'm having a cigarette, like I'm about to go inside. And he says it like that. I'm like, I'm pretty sure Miles said something else to the cop, like not to justify it, but I could tell Miles didn't just say, oh, I'm just finishing my cigarette. I have a feeling that's not what he said back. But anyways, it came back into, you know, he got his ass kicked, and you know, Francis was kind of like, oh my gosh, like Miles, like this is, you know, this is such a weird time. I had never, you know, I didn't know this is what I was getting into, is this kind of like bad boy jazz guy. Again, kind of lying. I think she knew exactly what she was getting into. But Sketches of Spain is kind of influenced by her in a sense. Sketches of Spain is a flamenco album, I guess, flamenco jazz album, if you want to box it in like that. But very orchestral, very like Lebowski interpretive dance landlord kind of like vibes at times. But it's one I've always really, really enjoyed, and I even like it a lot on the re-listen. But she was getting really into dancing, like flamenco and stuff, and she finally got him to go to a show because I think he was kind of like, it's gay, I'm not going to that, like what the hell, dude. And he finally went, and he bought like every flamenco album after that. And you know, these guys, like these creatives like this, like I kind of get this way with like podcasting. Any move, like almost like 60% of the movies I watch are going to be something I want to talk about, you know, or you know, music I listen to or books I read. I don't want to like talk about them. So it's just like, if he gets into something, it's going to come out through his work. And I love all throughout his career, you can tell what Miles is listening to. And that's so cool to me. He doesn't have to say it, you know. And but thoughts on Sketches of Spain? It's kind of a big transition for him.
Can I flex a little bit on this one? A little humble brag.
No, you may not.
You got the original press?
Yeah, well, for it is one of my favorites, and I think it was a big it was a big influence on like rock and stuff. Like, sure. I know like Jefferson Airplane and shit. All those guys were like Sketches. They would just do mushrooms and listen to Sketches of Spain and shit.
Will o' the Wisp, dude.
Yeah. But I'm friends, kind of new friends of a friend. My guitar teacher introduced me to Jaco Abel, who's a legit Spanish gypsy flamenco guitar player. Who's his teacher was Pepe Abuchuela, who's one of my favorite musicians now as of late. Just incredible flamenco. And
your wedding was full of flamenco.
Yeah, I was. You could tell what I'm on right now for sure. Yeah, exactly. And so for the 50th anniversary of Sketches of Spain, they did Miles from Spain in 2011, and also they did a Hollywood Bowl thing. And so Jaco Abel did Solia from Sketches of Spain, which is just a name of like a flamenco style, you know. And but it's incredible. There's YouTube videos of him do it. Yeah, so obviously just go check out Jaco Abel. He's an amazing guitar player. And so it's funny, like I've talked to him about it, and he's kind of like, because all those guys are just such purists, right? And they're like, yeah, Miles, Sketches of Spain, it was great. You know, it's not real flamenco, but it's cool for what it is, you know. Instead, not even like hating at all. Like these are like guys that are obsessed with Miles Davis because they're jazz guys too. But they're like, yeah, it's not flamenco. You know? And it's just so funny. They're just like, they can't help but just put it down and be like, nah, it's not real.
It ain't like, real wrestling, dude.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Almost like a Ennio Morricone record or something like a spaghetti western soundtrack. Yeah. But yeah, that was the first like kind of different one of his that I heard.
Yeah, well, you hear that, just that it's just so like ominous and odd, and you're like, it like almost doesn't fit in his catalog but it does, because it's kind of bridging, you know. In the 60s he doesn't get like full weird, but he starts experimenting a lot more, and it's kind of just that bridge from, you know, Kind of Blue, which is just like capital J jazz, man. Like just the jazz it gets. You could tell he's bored at that time though, because he's reached that apex. Like, what can I do with this sound that hasn't been done? He gets bored really easy, straight up like Andy Toy Story dropping the toy, the old toy. Just I'm good. Yeah, I'm good on this. And he never wanted to talk about his old albums ever, not once. No. Like he wasn't a great interview, honestly, a lot of times, like because people don't want to talk about, Decoy, the album in 1984. Not a lot of people do. Yeah, I do, but not a lot of people want to talk about that. Like, they're like, hey, Miles, cool. Miles, you're so cool, man. Like, Daddy-O, like, anybody that interviews him, and he's like, can you show me how to play the trumpet, Miles?
Yeah.
Can you show Nicolas Cage how to play the trumpet? Literally something that happened. It's a horrible interview. Horrible interview. I forget who it's on. I think it's Dick Cavett, where Nicolas Cage has is like, I don't know what he's promoting at the time. It's in the 80s. I don't know if it's like Peggy Sue. I have no idea what he's promoting. Maybe Raising Arizona or something. And he's on there and he's like, oh, well, do I like hold it like this or what? and Miles like, nah, man, you look stupid, man. Like, and he's like, you could tell it's like a gag. They're trying to like do a gag with Miles, and Miles is like, that's a trumpet, man. Like, ain't no jokes about a trumpet.
Yeah.
Like, it's so funny.
What's that one? Was it the same where they bring him a trumpet and he holds it and he's like, dude, I can't play this. He's like, I can't play this, dude. He's like, what
that was the Bill Boggs, I think.
Yeah. I think
the Bill Boggs interview is just, I mean, it's the Tao of Miles, dude. Like, dude. It's a great interview. People in the comments are like, Miles was so patient with him. I'm like, dude, it was good.
What's that part where he's like, I love the part. And see, this, whenever it comes to like the race stuff, I like what you said about how, we live in like a soft ass different era now where everyone's all like, on both sides of whatever, whatever, like if you're Chapo Trap House or whatever, but back then, like, what's that part in the Boggs where he's like, man, I just played Brazil, like Rio de Janeiro. He's like, those people got rhythm, man. Like, you don't understand. He's like, not like these people. And he points to the audience, and everyone's like, what the fuck, dude? Yeah. That shit's funny, dude. That's gold right there. I love it, dude.
It's because he has like legit hate in his voice. Like, you can hear it. Like, it's not like a bit. Like, he is like, he doesn't like white people. Like,
it's not a bit, but people make it into a bit, and they're like, "Oh, Miles."
Well, that's the thing. It's like it's these very like Requiem for a Dream ass like talk shows like that that he goes on that are just like so weird. Like I said, the Bill Boggs one is the best one. It's the most pleasurable one, and it's like kind of infamous, but I thought it was great. And he actually like was a fan of Bill Boggs, I guess. Like, he was just like, I've seen your show. It's like, which is he's like one of those like Michel Houellebecq guys where you could tell Houellebecq just watches like French C-SPAN all day. Like you could like, you're just like, is that what you watch all day? Like, he probably is. Because Miles would talk about like in the book, he's like, I didn't really like watch a lot of movies. I didn't really read a lot of books. But I would read the news, man. I read the news. It's just a total that generation thing. Like, I wanted to know what was going on, man. And which is pretty funny. Also, it is meant. He said he did his first film score, Louis Malle movie, which is a really good score. You can listen to it on all streaming platforms. It's good, very sax heavy and very trumpet heavy, but I forget what the movie's called, but I haven't seen it, but it's a Louis Malle film. And he was starting to pop in Europe too. Like Europe, he was it's kind of funny his like take about like Europe. He's always like, yeah, they were like real nice to me, unlike like racist America. I'm like, I think it's because you're like an import jazz like musician, you know what I mean? Like, I'm pretty sure they don't like black people like it at the time, but like you're going to like the niche jazz part of France where everyone has your albums. They like you, dude. You know what I'm saying?
It's kind of like a it's like a survivorship bias, or I don't know if that's the right term. It's one of those kind of things. It's like a filter,
I don't think I think if you were like a poor like black dude in France, like they were not fucking with you.
They'd be like, wow,
come here, buddy.
He's saying like with French starlets and stuff like that, and saying that like if he was just some guy on the street talking to like the working class guys, they would not have given a shit how famous of a jazz man he was.
So,
and also I think a lot of the European people, they kind of have that kind of hoity-toity attitude where they're like, oh yeah, we're cool. It's almost like a performative, I think, in a way back then.
For sure. That's what I mean. Like, it's like the red carpet's like rolled out for you in a way, like there's this like any event. It's not like an organic like, again, not excusing America. Like, we definitely had our own issues here. Like with that, it's not, I just know I'm like, I don't think France is like not racist. Like, I just don't know. Just kind of my. I just don't think that's true. But
he's hanging with Sartre or whatever.
Exactly.
For the average French guy.
French like progressive like communist people, dude. It's not like it's different, you know. Like it's just like I said. I don't think if you went to like the French countryside, like there'd be like, what the fuck is this guy?
And like traveling is like a drug too. When you're in another place, you're just like, whoa, you know, it's like a totally
100%.
different,
100%. Like I said, and you're like it's like a more like itinerary trip, you know. Like it's just kind of I don't know. So we were ordered to talk about this album, or else there'd be consequences. So, luckily, I like it. Someday my prince will come, which does have Francis on the cover. And it's it's pretty funny. It's like a big deal on the Amazon George Floyded Out documentary about how she's on the cover. It's like, and he had a black woman on the cover of his album. That did for young black girls. Like everyone starts doing like the, you know, the big like representation matters stuff. And you like Miles talks about it and he's just like, man, she was just a badass bitch, man. Like she was just fine as hell. I wanted to put her on. Like he wasn't like doing social justice. Like, you know, dude. Like it's so funny. Like
why did I know that's like, come on, dude. How did that become a thing? That's so with Miles, you know, it
wasn't a thing for anybody back then. That's the thing. Like it was a very like, it was weird. Like it was a more divided country, but people were just like honest about what they were. Whereas now people like retcon it as like all people were like these Marvel, like with like white people were like Thanos, and then the Avengers got together and stopped Thanos. It's like, no, like there was after a while, like it was just like, you know, there was definitely some stuff that had to happen, but it wasn't like Miles Davis with every move was taking down racism. It's like, no, he would just call white people like faggots, dude. Like, it was just that was the way he did it. Like, that's just not like I think that's a better way to go about it, to be honest.
Yeah. He basically just had like a kill Whitey tattoo.
Yeah, 100%. Like it's like I just wish like we were actually like back to that rather than like this other shit that we have now, where it's just this like we know it's kind of over, but everyone's like needs it to still be a thing. You know, God, like terrible.
Also, have we talked about Tio Macero yet?
We have not.
Well, that's a great track on this album, but also he's like the unsung hero, especially in the fusion era. Producer, right? He's like the producer, genius, mastermind.
Dave Brubeck.
Technologist, kind of engineer and shit. And and I also think he was also like straight Miles's like kind of low key hookup too, and like drug dealer, you know, and just
for sure.
What's the song? He has like Tio's bag or something, you know. It's just a reference to that and stuff. So.
Dude, the guy's name is Attilio Macero. I feel like Sicario would hunt him down, and they would hunt him down like Sicario. Like that's it, But the title track "Someday My Prince Will Come," which is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, from that film, which I actually didn't know. I'm not a Snow White head, to be honest. Like, I didn't have like no. Like some people grow up with sisters, so like they like hear it. I didn't, so it's like I watched like I liked some of the girl like Disney movies, but like Snow White just wasn't really on in the house. So when that song's out, like I'm like, wow, this song's got its own like hyperlink, and I'm like, oh, it's the thing. I did watch the rendition of it from the film, so it's from 1937, and it makes sense, right? You do it. He is like madly in love with this Francis woman, and he had so it makes sense when you have like Snow White kind of like song opening it up, and it's beautiful. I mean, it's some of his best trumpet playing, I think, is on that song. I don't know if you guys agree.
Shout out Hank Mobley and Paul Chambers, our friend made sure we mentioned. I mean, seriously though, like these random guys that are just on every single classic jazz album during these eras just have, and they're, they probably didn't make a ton of money in their career or whatever, but they're just absolute masters. I think about that shit a lot, because it's not like even Miles is like, oh, he sold 1 million records once, and it's like that, not that much, and he's the biggest guy. And then you think all these other guys, and they, I'm sure they had a great life and everything, but they were in it. They're not in it for commercial gain whatsoever. Right? Yeah,
and you think about the rest of music. I think about when we just did that Jacques Tati episode, and you think about like, you're like, this is 1960. Like it's kind of like, I mean, like you're getting in the white kind of like forward thinking world, you're getting like Buddy Holly and stuff, and things like that. And then you're getting, kind of, they're still like, it's not like instrumental music is like really popular at this point, like, and he would talk about it all the time. Like he would never outright hate on Dave Brubeck, but he was just like, man, Dave just played white as fuck, man. And it sold like, and it just was like, was just like it was this thing like Miles like I can't play white. You know, like I just can't do it. Like you're like, well, do an album of you playing white, like once, you know, see what happens, like see how it sells. He's like, no, I will not, and absolutely not happening. But he would talk about like Dave. He would never say Dave Brubeck sucked. He would always just go like, I'm mad that like people would go to the record store and pick his album over mine, you know, and knowing like I'm probably better. Shout out Philly Joe Jones too, by the way. Great drummer, kind of a another guy, kind of like a sad story. I feel like he never he was a very good, but like I think was he the one? No, he's not the one I'm thinking of. Then I thought there was one guy that died pretty young. Yeah, Miles had this guy that died when he was like 21 years old. Like that was in his band. But maybe I'm just some of these in his autobiography. It all gets really muddled. But Eben, we lost you for a second. Do you have anything to say about either Sketches of Spain or Someday My Prince Will Come?
No, not really. You can hear me? No?
Barely. You sound different this time.
Yeah, I'm on my phone. I may have to go back to my laptop. But no, kind of when we get to Miles, then I'll chime in.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, perfect. So yeah, let's keep moving.
Dude, I swear to God, Miles. I was thinking about that. It's so funny that all the real heads know what's up, dude. The real heads all coalesce around the same shit. I'm like, the fact that you're like, no, Miles, that's the one. Yeah,
interesting.
I love that, dude. Yeah,
I like that one.
I love the two Gil Evans kind of like album. I think these are Gil Evans albums. These 7 Steps to Heaven and Quiet Nights.
I'm not super familiar with
they're fun. I didn't know anything about them. They're good. Again, it's got that orchestral kind of. It's a different sound for Miles and stuff. Not a whole lot to say about them, but they are good. Again, Teo Macero producing and stuff. It's very, very good. But yeah, it's very, Once Upon a Summertime, very good. And Wait Till You See Her. Those are really standout tracks. I had never heard those albums before, like at all, until I was going on this dive. That's why it's really fun to do these. You get kind of like these split albums that come out, Miles and Monk, and Thelonious Monk's pretty funny too when you think about Thelonious Monk, because wasn't he kind of just a family man? Or no, that was Dizzy Gillespie.
Yeah.
Guy. Yeah, Monk was kind of Monk. No, you know what they would say? Monk was just this like massive dude. Like he was just like this big guy, like this big like intimidating guy. But he said like the way he played. I remember like Miles, like you can always tell when Miles like really gets into somebody, because he said the first time he heard like Monk play, he was like, I just didn't know you could do that.
Yeah,
he doesn't even say what that is. He's just like, I didn't know you could do that. But I like Monk a lot, dude.
Yeah, he's great. Definitely touches of Reddit, when these things get like retconned in the modern era. And I saw some like dissident kind of, I was on probably Twitter or something, trying to be like, oh, like Monk, yeah, there would like white people just made him into a thing, and like it would. Like, no, dude. But fucking Thelonious Monk was raw, dude. It's like, yeah.
We won the fucking election. Shut up. Like, I'm lying. Oh, geez. God, these people make me sick, dude. Like, no, what? Like, dude, I'm sorry, dude. There's people that are like, that will just be like, actually, rock actually was white people only. And you're like, okay, we don't have to do that. Like, I don't like revisionist history. Tell the fucking story. I thought that's what we wanted, was like the actual story without ideology attached. No, it's just dumb. Like, I
think these are mostly like bait tweets. Like they're just
I know that's the problem. That's the problem, because that's the problem with Elon's fucking Twitter, dude. I'm sorry, he does this no. What we do is we don't guarantee reach. We guarantee no censorship. But then it's like, okay, but you incentivize bullshit. That's the problem. Not misinformation, bullshit. It's two different things. So like, it'll be somebody that'll just be like, yeah, I actually think Dave Brubeck's a lot better than Miles Davis. Like, honestly, like Miles Davis just gets the kind of like Black Panther like bullshit stuff. Shut up.
Yeah, dude.
Like, like just that's not what you think.
You don't believe that. No one believes that.
I don't believe that you believe that.
No, exactly.
So I just
say around this time, I like that Circle in the Round album. I know it's kind of like an offcut sort of album, but I think that's got really great trumpet playing, like where he's actually got really cool like the song Circle in the Round is kind of pretty fun, and like good like trumpet licks and things like that.
Yeah, And I'd like to give the ESP. I like ESP a lot. I think that album rules.
Fucking classic.
Yeah, that's great.
Great album cover. Shout out. I could be wrong. Introduction of Wayne Shorter and Herbie Hancock on here.
And Tony Williams, all of them. That it was the first.
How do you bounce back with a band like that, dude? When you lose Coltrane, fucking all these people, and then you
that's
bounce
what he
back?
did.
It's insane. That like you arguably get better.
Wasn't Tony Williams like 17 when he
yes.
like recorded?
Yeah,
dude. And it's fucking insane. Yeah, this is arguably his greatest band, even better than the Coltrane band, which is crazy.
It's a good stretch.
Herbie is
good
unreal. Yeah, Herbie is unreal.
And that's the thing. Like he found these. Like Herbie was kind of blown up already. Like he was in Donald Byrd's. Which shout out Donald Byrd, dude. Like one of the goats. But like a lot of these guys, he just found. Like I know, like Keith Jarrett. Keith Jarrett was playing in his band to like 6 people plus Miles Davis's band. Like that's how he was discovered. So it wasn't. He found these kids in the most random, like
he's a recruiter. He was college football. He was a college football coach.
Yeah,
dude.
for
That's
sure.
Who he was.
He was like a straight Arkansas, like Tennessee high. fucking weird. Yeah, like this inside linebacker is like, he's like 250 pounds and runs like a 4.3 40.
Why are you offering that guy? He sucks, dude.
Yeah.
No, he doesn't. And like Herbie, who goes on to have like, oh my gosh, what an influential career like Herbie Hancock has. And I love that he's kind of like a dweeb too when you hear him talk. He's like a huge nerd. And huge nerd. But I mean, dude, it's so funny. Like when you play on Apple Music, whenever you're done with an album, it shows like suggested stuff. And Herbie is always suggested after Miles. But it's funny because you'll be listening to like hard bop Miles. And then it goes to like fucking Watermelon Man. You're like, that is not the Herbie I would go to after like listening to hard bop Miles.
Well, that's Herbie is kind of the one bridge between like the hard bop and the fusion. And
you know how gay it is how on Wikipedia they have this album listed as post bop.
Oh yeah, dude.
You're so gay if you ever say that word or that hyphenated word of all. I'm into post bop.
It's so stupid because it's literally it's meaningless. All these guys, like the way I heard it described is these guys were just basically doing like quantum physics as jazz. It's just the most advanced. Just all they were doing was just extending chords and just doing crazy stuff that would not be done in any time. Could not have been done in the 50s whatsoever.
Right.
But yeah, I think Herbie. I mean. Obviously, Herbie Hancock's more of the household name, but Tony Williams is just an absolute nut. Dude. It's just absolute. No one was doing anything like that, and I don't even know how you get that good to be by that young, doing like just the most crazy polyrhythms. Like 5-on-7 within like a 4/4, just fucking crazy shit. And he was weirdly influential on like punk drumming too and stuff. It's like pretty crazy, dude.
Shout out, man. This album is a no skipper. I mean, every track is good. It's just like you're starting to see the song lengths extend a little bit more, I think, on here too. Like average song length looks like it's about 6 minutes long. Whereas in prior album Sketches of Spain, he definitely expands it, but for like an actual kind of like proper jazz album like this, he seems to be stretching it out a little bit more on here. ESP absolutely that is like of the 60s. I know people love Someday My Prince Will Come, it's fantastic, but like that might be like of the 60s that first one, just like whoa, where he just really sets the world on fire. So Miles Smiles. Miles Smiles. Again, we have we're back with the same band that we were just talking about. Ron Carter, Herbie Hancock, Wayne Shorter, Tony Williams. And it's Teo Macero once again. And Footprints is one of my all-time favorite jazz tracks. It's like the mainstream one. It's the one with the hyperlink on Wikipedia, but I'm not afraid to like that one the most. It's 10 minutes of just bliss.
Yeah.
What do you guys think?
Yeah, Footprints is just a legendary song, and Freedom Jazz Dance. These guys were just absolutely crushing it. Also, I like even back then, Miles Smiling was enough in an anomaly to like playfully make an album name out. Be like, whoa, look at that, we caught it on camera, guys.
In the
it's not even the craziest smile. It's just like kind of a little cheeky grin sort of thing.
I know.
Like in the book, he's
like,
hating on every black guy that smiles. He's like, they're just like Uncle Tom's, like, you know, tap dancing for Whitey. He gets mad about like Louis Armstrong smiling. Or whatever.
Yeah. Oh, it's funny too because it's like this Monty Python animated close-up album cover on like him smiling. It's like, and then you almost would pan out and it would be like an old British couple. I like his smile. You know, like it's such a funny album cover. Like it's like it like doesn't fit with like the rest of his album covers at all. But it's God. I mean, I'll be damned if this album doesn't fit. This is so good. Freedom Jazz Dance. That's probably my top two on the album is Footprints and Freedom Jazz Dance. But to me, I put these albums on and don't look a lot of times, so I don't know what song is what a lot of times.
I was gonna say, I don't know how you guys remember these track names. I only remember album titles. Like when it comes to jazz, if they're not saying the lyrics, I don't know what they're called.
Yeah, because the idea of making a jazz single is so funny to me, you know, because it's just like you don't.
It's like ideas, you know. It's just like, oh, we have an idea for this, you know, and that's kind of song is like a weird concept.
When somebody says like your top 10 like Miles Davis songs, it's like I don't know, like I mean, exactly, and it's like I don't know. Eben, did you get hooked up?
Yeah.
Sounds great. So tell me about Miles Smiles, man. You were
well, it's just one of those albums that I've listened to so I mean that whole era, that quintet, I think those aren't my favorite Miles Davis albums, but if you were to just to be like the musicianship, I think that's like that quintet is it. That's like the best. Musicianship of all five guys just destroying, you know. At the top of their game, it's kind of hard to top that. And of all those, to me, Miles Smiles is like the one where they're going so the level is just crazy. And then there's a few things in there like that Freedom Jazz Dance, you know, his solo. So at this point, they're getting super modal, and he's getting very modal and even like minimal in his soloing, which is and especially you hear it on that tune. And there's one part like in the middle of his solo of Freedom Jazz Dance where Tony Williams just goes into like a simple like 4/4 beat. Yeah. And like you have to think like hip hop doesn't exist. There's no electronic music at the time.
No funk.
And they just drop. There's not even funk. And they drop these like 8 bars in the middle of that solo, that sound. It's completely futuristic. I don't like if you go back and listen, you'll know what I'm talking about. And he just plays it. Miles plays a couple notes, and Tony Williams is playing a simple beat, and it sounds like a Tribe Called Quest song, or like it's so weird. Like how did So you hear these snippets of kind of what's about to come in music. So I nerd out. Like personally, I nerd out over stuff like that. I'm like, wow, like what if you put that record on in 1967 and then you heard that? How would you feel? You know.
Jimmy Heath wrote Gingerbread Boy, and Jimmy Heath has such an interesting life. He's always available for these Miles documents. He made it to 93, so you know when you start getting into the 90s and 2000s, you want to talk about Miles Davis. There's not a lot of people alive, sadly, because it's just a really high mileage career that these people lived fast and stuff. So he was around, but it was crazy. Heath was arrested and convicted twice for the sale of heroin in 1954. So he had to serve time and all that, and he was released, still addicted to heroin, and went cold turkey, and basically in prison composed most of the Chet Baker and Art Pepper album Playboys in prison. Writing jazz in prison. Like that's like
Mac Dre like recording over the phone,
or no, not even like, or like some like opportunistic boomer would make like a thing like that's what they do in prison, man, is they write jazz, like one of those like fake like boomer things of like people who are like there's so many geniuses in prison, man, you know, like one of the like just like one of those like weird like documentaries they would do or something. But and then it's just like then he gets released in 1959 and he's just clean for the rest of his life and lives until 2023, gives birth to a son who starts Mtume. Like just amazing. Like what like it's just these people, these like kind of I don't want to reduce Jimmy Heath to like a side character, but like in the span of Miles, like these guys have like whole other careers and then they work with Miles. Like it's so cool, man. Like because he wouldn't always get guys that were like 17 years old and be like, this is where you're gonna come up. He would by this time he's a factor. and you're getting the Jimmy Heaths and, you know, these other people that are, you know, helping out on Chet Baker albums and stuff. So this is one of my favorite albums, Sorcerer. Love one of my favorite movies too. No relation, but I just Prince of Darkness is a masterpiece song to me. Wayne Shorter was really writing a lot of these songs on here. It's a big Wayne Shorter album. Herbie Hancock kind of gets his track The Sorcerer, which is also fantastic too on here. But I love this album. This is one that I hadn't spent a lot of time with before. This is when he starts dating Cicely Tyson, by the way, because he had a falling out with Frances. By falling out, she fell after he hit her. That is bad. It was because Quincy Jones was trying to slide, by the way. And they're like friends forever, but like he beat her up over over it. Like he was a real jealous guy. I mean, he was a jealous guy. He was like what was it? Miles Davis said it himself. He was when he get kind of like cynical towards the end, and he was doing these interviews. People would talk about like famous artists, and they'd say, they asked him like, is Charlie Parker is there any like good stories you could tell me about Charlie Parker where he's like a good guy? He goes, well, any genius is usually selfish. And that's kind of like, I kind of think that's kind of true. Like people that are just like the genius, the one that everyone talks about for years and years and years, a lot of times they're gonna like be these like selfish kind of controlling sociopathic people. You even look in sports like Tom Brady, man. What does he do the minute he retires? He starts a clothing brand that fails. Oh, that fails. I'm going to buy a football team now and I want to run it. And so it's just like these people just can't chill, you know? So like this whole thing with Frances, you want to be with this like artsy girl who's dancing and stuff. And, you know, definitely likes to show off and be the center of attention. And then she starts getting the attention. You don't like it. And Quincy Jones, especially one of your peers, kind of one of the guys that you're cool with, but like also get compared to, in ways competition, you know, he comes in and he pushes Frances down and hits her, and he you know, it's pretty funny. Like in his biography, he liked her, but like her revisionist of it is like, oh, and he spent years talking about, I'll never meet a woman like Frances. Yeah. Oh, he spent forever. And he's right. There are no women like me. I was like, oh my gosh, stop it. Like, because I'm sure there's a middle ground where he missed her for a while and whatever. But it's like he moved on to like Cicely Tyson right away. And he was talking about how he was forced. Like, yeah, it's just funny. It's like but he like literally moved on to like another actress. So, but she's on the cover of this side profile and everything. It is a really cool album cover. Anybody else love Sorcerer as much as me? Is it just me?
Yeah, I mean,
I like that one.
Yeah, I just pretty much from like ESP Smiles on, I'm fully in with every single album.
Yeah, I know he really
just like I'm in on every single one. Like they're all yeah. And I like the earlier stuff too, but it's
which is weird though, because the hard bop era is like people will like just stop by this point.
Yes.
That's fucking insane to me. Like that you will, because he's just getting started.
I know.
How long have we recorded for? We're just getting started apparently, because this is amazing. Like Sorcerer, and I love the next one. I love Nefertiti.
Yep.
I love it. I love the title track. It's ominous, very smoky, like noir, ominous tone to it. You can tell he's starting to get a little tired of jazz. That as we know it. Again, it's a 40-minute album, real in and out. You're in and out of there real quick.
But they're still kind of starting to become kind of like almost concept albums or something around this time. All these Sorcerer, ESP, like there's just something different about them. They feel more cohesive and like you can just see how like Pink Floyd's or whomever like would probably listen to this and be getting like ideas from it.
Well, Breathe, right? Breathe by Pink Floyd. The keyboard, what's his name? The keyboardist for Pink Floyd?
I forget, but yeah, that was like a kind of
he said right? That's it. Yeah, he's like, this is a Miles
something
Davis.
Right, is it?
Yeah, I can't remember because he comes up a lot in Inherent Vice. Remember the guy gets the keyboard from fucking the Pink Floyd?
Yeah.
I'm like, why? And I never remember his damn name. Great, obviously legend, but I just not enough for me, I guess, to remember. But the Nefertiti, I love. I love the Pinocchio, which Wayne Shorter would rework for a Weather Report song later, which is pretty cool. Yeah. Both versions awesome. Weather Report, legendary band. If you're new to jazz, check them out too. If you like 70s Miles, check out Weather Report too. So because and it sounds obvious to a lot of people, but might not be. This is kind of the divider, right? The dividing point. And it's kind of, this is where like in a movie you would have the intermission.